And it's really great to see Mr. Tom Cairo, president of Fairfield, and Warren. It's really great to see both of you here, so thank you for coming.
Sure thing.
Warren does beautiful landscaping at the Cape and other areas. It's great to have some Fairfield people here. We're here today talking about the Piney Swamp community. There's a lot of stuff that I talked about last year for Antioch Week, which was in August, but there's some new stuff talking about this time, and there's lunch here too. So it'll be a good day.
You're gonna have to just sit it down on the piano.
Oh, yeah. That's okay. We can get through. Yeah. So Antioch Week was last year. Antioch Homecoming was this year, and it is Friday and Saturday. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, great. Yeah, so that'll be another great time to hear from Dave, hear from Lori Jackson Black, and also have some fellowship here with the Antioch family. And just as a brief primer, just to remind everybody, Fairfield, we do archaeology, we do preservation, and we do community outreach and things like that. We have 5 properties. Of most importance right now is the Fairfield site in the top left. That is just down the road at the end of Fairfield Lane. And there's a summer camp going on there right now. I may pop over later just to say hi. The next slide would be great. It is tricky. Yeah. This is never the fun part. We have a Fairfield Family Circle once a month, and I do the AV stuff, and every time it's like, oh man, what's going on? What's it going to do this time? So I'm going to start off by showing you this aerial photograph. This is in 2014, showing the Fairfield, what we currently own, the Fairfield Foundation has of the Fairfield plantation. And you can see the creek down in the bottom, the fields, that's sort of the heart of the plantation. The ruins of the house is kind of in the middle. You see kind of a grassy area. That's where the ruins are of the house. It's only about 120 or 30 acres. I'm probably way off on that. That is currently still held by the foundation. But at one point, there were several thousand acres part of this, and it included where we are right now, Antioch Baptist Church, Truth in the Spirit. And I mean, I think it went all the way to Highway 17, it crossed Highway 17. This is a big deal. Next, please. So you're looking at here, down in the bottom, just above the telephone pole, is the Woodville School. This is a drone picture that I think Ashley McHouston took a few years ago. But you can see this corridor of homes and businesses and residences, mainly African American, right on Highway 17. But in the background, all those trees, that wooded area is Piney Swamp. So when you're coming down the road and you see Piney Swamp Road, that's what it is. And the next slide, you can see another view of Piney Swamp. So in Gloucester, when you're driving through, it looks like a pretty built-up area, right? But when you're up in the air, you see how open it is, how much woods is there, how much forest and wilderness. And you ask yourself, well, why is that? Why are these areas still not been cleared and turned into things? Well, it's a very acidic, it's a swamp. I mean, there's not much use for agriculture back there. It's sort of these are sort of areas, there are several big swamps like that in Gloucester that is sort of in between larger plantations. It's sort of a different kind of community area back in there. Next, please. So a lot of these slides I'll breeze through pretty quickly. And this one here, this is just an old map. It's one of the first maps that I'm aware of that shows Piney Swamp. You see it in the blow up on the right. They spell Piney Swamp P-I-N-Y. They dropped the E, but that's not important. They show Piney Swamp way up close to the White Marsh. But if you look at all that kind of a darker green or sort of a lighter green, that is sort of the expanse of the Piney Swamp area. But you see the little dotted lines. There are roads crossing the swamp, where today there's nothing. So that's one thing we're very interested in. Next, please. So this is another little map. This shows a lot of the properties in this area where we are today when they were doing a post office in the little community called Bridges. There's nothing there now. I'm not sure exactly where it is. I think it's down I think it's down the road towards Coke, towards Shelley. I'm not entirely sure.
It's right across the street from when you turn that off onto Borden Road, off of Providence Road. It was right across the street.
Oh, really?
Because Mr. Borden's house is called New Bridges.
Oh, how about
Because of the proximity. It was across the street from the sawmill, from the Borden sawmill.
Okay, down near the...
Right there.
Okay, well, that'll come up a little bit, then that's very good to know.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when they put the, when they did the post office application, they actually included a hand-drawn map showing where all these people live. And it's not just it's a lot of, it's predominantly African American. And so we have this incredible rare look at where people live that maybe didn't own land, or maybe the census tells us kind of where they were, but we don't have specifics. And so this map was a really amazing thing that we found. And on the right, you can see, so I'm sorry, I need to explain a little better. So on the left is a hand-drawn map included with the application. On the right, a local historian and friend, Bill Lawrence, he cleaned it up a little bit. It's hard to read the yellow handwriting, but he was familiar enough with the names, he was able to say, this is where they live. Now, Antioch, I seem to have not put a star on there when I meant to, so sorry about that. But Antioch is up there, kind of in the middle, just above Bridges Post Office, where you see the name Miner's Store and Pointer and Payne. It's kind of up in that area. But what's interesting about this, you see the road that cuts across. If I had thought, I would have highlighted it. But there's a lot of these names appear to be closer and maybe in Piney Swamp, which is amazing because there's not much you can do out there except for log it. The agriculture, it's not great soil. And so we're interested in learning, why were people living back in there? What were their stories? Next, please. Oh, that's fine. And the map is great too because you get a lot of these older community names like Ordinary and Bridges, and people that have lived here long enough know what those names are. But there's a lot of communities that just sort of lose track of where they are. And a lot of the names on there, so at the bottom, I see now the red star is actually Timberneck, and you see the name Catlin above it. So I mentioned Timberneck earlier. We're doing tremendous and wonderful restoration work out there. And a lot of these smaller names were people that came off of those plantations, including Croswell, who actually, as the maps seem to indicate, Croswell, Harris, Foxwell, some of these people lived on the Catlin Islands. So if you're at Machicomico State Park at Timberneck, you see sort of the bands of trees out in the water. That's where some of those people were.
I'm sorry.
Oh, it's okay.
Yeah, it's not cooperating.
We'll get through.
There it is. There it is.
All right, cool. All right, so this is 1937 aerial photograph. And if you look sort of towards the middle, towards the top, you see kind of a dark scar going through the landscape. That's an old ditch. And what's amazing about it is that it corresponds almost to a T with an 1789, I think, plat of the Fairfield property, exactly right through there. The canal is almost exactly 1 mile long, exactly. So the people that were out there, whether it was dug with slave labor or perhaps the existing canal was something that had been improved upon later with machinery just to keep the line visible, we don't know. But it's an amazing story to think about people out in those woods draining that area. And for what reason? It corresponds almost perfectly with the straight mile. It's amazing. On the right, you'll see a picture of some kids playing in the ditch. That is what the ditch currently looks like. I wish I had a picture showing how it's straight as a pen. But that's another amazing part of the Fairfield landscape. Next slide, please. So this one, we took a, I believe, 1906 topographic map, and we overlaid it onto a current map, and we traced out where all the roads were in 1906, and then we removed the old map, and it shows us. So all the darker lines are parcels, all those dotted lines, those are all roads that are not there anymore. And so we're wondering, you see on the right all those dotted lines going right through the worst of the swamp. So what were these? Were these little cart paths or people were crossing the swamp? How far back does this history go of African Americans in that area? And also, a lot of the white landowners probably went to those areas as well. But we don't know. We don't know the context. If you look at the next slide, you'll see we did the same thing, but instead of tracing the roads, we put buildings and structures. And that'll be on the next slide. And it'll just show little boxes, I think, where all the buildings were. What was really cool about that one is that it shows buildings in places that are not there now. It doesn't show Antioch Church because it wasn't there in 1906. But it does show a church across the street, slightly down the road. So we're wondering, is that when Antioch Church came out of? Was there an older church in this area? And so it's fascinating to look at Antioch's history and where did it come from? Did it come out of a larger church? We have reason to think that. But we also have maps that show a church right here. And a lot of the Piney Swamp people that still live in this community have ties to that churchyard. And, you know, maybe there's a cemetery there too. So we have a lot of interest as archaeologists in getting people connected with these places on the landscape. One other thing that's really cool about this, you'll notice a lot of the road pathways actually follow property lines, and that was a common thing in the day. You could have a property ditch at the edge of your property, or it might just be a lane or something dividing the property. So parts of Fairfield today, oh, there we go. Yeah, parts of Fairfield today actually still have, no, wrong way.
Yeah, it's going backwards.
Oh, it's okay. We'll be all right.
Yeah.
Yeah, parts of the Fairfield property today, in the current deed, have references to a road along the property line. Roads that aren't there anymore, but they're still reflected in the deed language today. Yeah, and there we have our, oh, you're good. Yeah, so these are the old structures. So you see the dotted lines, or the dotted circles, those are ones that are, actually, yeah, the dotted circles and the red circles are both structures that are no longer there. Unfortunately, I didn't put a key on this, and so I forget what the difference is, but I'll fix that sometime. Yeah, so if you look over on the right side of the yellow polygon, those are a lot of buildings on the, actually, I'm sorry, the lower half of that image, you see an explosion of buildings all over the place. That is where a lot of Fairfield was divided and sold off to African Americans in the area. Next, please.
Can I ask who
Sure.
did that? Who divided it and sold it off?
So the Levitt family, who owned Fairfield at the time, I think it was 1893, give or take, they were having financial troubles, and so it went to court, and I forget the word, whether it was delinquent taxes or whatever. But African Americans, then they divided the property. African Americans came in that were already living there. They were able to get deeds to the land where they were.
Is it possible that they were like former slaves that had been at that?
We have some evidence of that. And I don't want to be wrong here, but I believe Achilles Johnson was one such name. Achilles shows up on a list of, I forget what the list was, but there's evidence that Achilles was enslaved in Fairfield. But several years later, somebody named Achilles Johnson ended up buying one of these parcels.
I love that.
More research, right? More stuff. All right, next, please.
Another question?
Oh, sure.
This is a question. You were pointing out that there were a lot of swamps and that there were people possibly living back there. And I just looked it up, you know, what type of food resources would be available back there.
Right.
And I was just reading, it said fish, including shellfish, certain mammals, plants, rice, seaweeds, a range of vegetables, fruits and nuts, etc., reptiles, amphibians, and insects, and anthropods. But I was just curious to find out for myself, like, what resources would have been available to them in that area for food.
Well, in a few minutes, we'll talk about the case of Sam, which is kind of an example of, I think there really weren't that many resources. I mean, there's deer back there. I mean, you can survive, but that's a really good question. Yeah, I don't think there's a lot of that back in there, but at the same time, I don't have that experience of knowing what to look for.
Sure.
That's a really good question, though.
Thank you.
Yeah, we'll be following up on that. So this right here is one of the coolest maps. It's from 1787. If you look at what's on the left, down in there they have meets and bounds. They have deed calls, you know, south 47 degrees east, 320 poles or whatever. We took GIS mapping technologies and recreated it over the current map, and it actually fits with current property lines very well. On the right, that straight line on the far right, that is the boundary ditch that is still there to this day. Now, what's really amazing about this, if you look on the image on the left, up near the top, you see that little squiggly line? That's the road. When we overlaid this over the current map, it was almost a perfect match with what the road looks like today. So we have reason to think that the road in front of Antioch, at least for shoreways, is almost identical, no change, for hundreds of years, which is really important in trying to understand what it was like for people that lived here. If the road is the same, then you can walk the same footsteps. But if road sections were blitzed or redirected, you kind of lose that tangibility to history. So that was really amazing to see that same bump in the road, almost perfectly mirrored. Now, what would really be a bummer is if that was just coincidence and the surveyor just knew the road does this. But you know what? That's what it looks like today, and that's special. Let's go to the next slide. Yeah, so this is the input.
Can I add one thing? He was asking about what did they survive on? And there was a study that was done, I'm not sure what year it was, but they studied the bones that were found in the slave quarters properties on the Fairfield property. And it's 3 pages, single space of different animals that were found. So the wildlife was plentiful in that area. You could probably live off of that wildlife, everything from raccoons to all kinds of other, small things like mice and rats and dogs. But they were able to live off of a lot of these domestic, non-domestic animals that lived in the area.
Yeah, Sarah, thanks for bringing that up. I completely forgot about that study. That came out of a subfloor pit at Fairfield. Is that correct?
I think so. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So we have a lot more work to do on that question. It's amazing. Okay, so if you look at the image on the right, you'll see a reconstruction I did of area plantations, probably around the time of the Civil War, give or take. And if you look on the left, those are what all the old plats look like. So what you do is you go through each surveyor's call on there and you plot it in GIS software, and then you put the puzzle pieces together. And it's amazing because if you want to look at the county's GIS today online, you just type in Gloucester County GIS, you can see exactly who owns this property, that property. We don't have that for the past, but we're trying to do that. And it's really useful for people that may come to us and say, my third great grandfather was, David Burrell. Where did he live? Or David Burrell. And, unless you have something physical in the landscape you can go to and say, this is your home tract, you lose so much of that value. And so we're really trying to map everything out. And also to show how big Fairfield was and how it interplayed with Rosewell and Timberneck, White Marsh, all these other areas. So you see here on the right, Fairfield was already about 460, 500 acres, give or take. So by the mid-1800s, it was already rapidly diminished from what it was previously. Let's go to the next slide. Yeah, that map is a work in progress. You will notice there's a few gaps in there where I don't have a label, and that's just because we don't have the research done yet. But we're hoping to eventually have this more or less up to date with closer to the present so people can look at stuff that happened more recently. Okay, yeah. So this is something that Fairfield, Dave and Thane put together about 20 years ago or so. And they took the Fairfield plantation as it was in 1880 on the top, and they did title work and they looked at all the different parcels and figured out who owned that land at the time. And on the bottom they did the same thing for 1920. And if you go to the next slide, this is where you see how all these properties are becoming black owned. All these people that were already there, but then they're actually getting title to the property. And you can see how by 1880 it was already happening. By 1920 it was a majority. This was a black community in the Pine Swamp area. Next slide, please. Yeah, so now I'm going to kind of talk about, so that's kind of bringing everyone up to date on what we do with the mapping, but now I'll go on some other stuff for a little bit. So the Fairfield Family Circle is something that Sarah has been very involved in, and I've tried to be in as much as I can. We meet once a month and we talk about all things like this. In March, sorry, I lose my train of thought here. And Apostle Marquita was there too, yeah. We spoke at the Lemon Symposium down in Williamsburg, and if you want, I'd love to hear a little bit more about that, Marquita, because I unfortunately had to be there remotely. It was not ideal at all, but it is what it is. But we had a discussion, it was a panel called Black Resilience Through Resistance, Creativity, and Cooperation, and we talked about the what, the why, the when, all this stuff about Fairfield and how the communities formed in this area and why it mattered. And let's go to the next slide. And what I was tasked with talking about was sort of the attempts to discover more about the story of someone named Sam. And I'll just make sure that comes up in a minute. Unfortunately, the slides are a little bit jumbled. My fault for that, but I took a lot of the slides from Antioch Week last year, and I improved them. I added more stuff. I tried to put more stuff in, and it's always a little bit clunky doing that. No, that's okay. We'll be all right. Take care. But yeah, I can talk a little bit about Sam. So Sam was an enslaved person, and Sarah Lewis, who's on the Zoom with us, feel free to jump in. Oh, there we go. Perfect. So Sam was an enslaved person, and he was about 1813 or so. The story came out, and Sarah, and please correct me if I get the story wrong, Sarah read this in a book. Was it Hampton Newsom? I think we can get into the nitty-gritty later. But anyway, it turns out that there was a lot of uncertainty in this area during the War of 1812. We don't really think about the War of 1812 at all. I mean, no one reenacts the War of 1812. It's not a period that we talk about very much. But apparently in this area, Tidewater, Virginia, there was a lot of fear by sort of the white landed gentry, all these big plantations. They were worried about uprising by the black folks, by the enslaved people on the plantations. And that's because there were instances of the British sort of, I don't know what the right word would be, whether it's manipulating or abusing or encouraging. There was cooperation to some degree. I don't know what the right words would be, but basically there was a fear that the British would free all these people. And there was all kinds of things that had happened previously, like Prosser's Rebellion in Richmond. You have stuff going on for hundreds of years since the first enslaved person landed here. And around the 1812, there was a lot of fear that something would happen and everybody would. It was upheaval, So Sam, allegedly, this is what they accused him of stealing. Let's see, what did he steal? I mean, it was all kinds of things. It was herring, it was meat, it was things like that. And bringing all these things for his subsistence to Piney Swamp, where he had allegedly an encampment with 5 or 6 other people in Piney Swamp. And so they're using this area. This is sort of a shadow in between the white areas. This is an area where it's where you go to hide. And Sam and his band were allegedly in there. They caught somehow, I don't know the story fully, and I believe they sentenced him to death. It was a terrible story, but we want to expand on it more. We want to know where these people came from. So what I did is I started looking at all the people, and it listed the slave holder for the 5 or 6 people in Sam's group of runaways. And we're trying to map out where these plantations were that they came from. And it's all over the county. You would have thought maybe Sam would have gone out in the Piney Swamp with people that he knew from Fairfield or somewhere like that, people that he was with. But it begs the question, how did these people meet? What kind of connections are going on between plantations among the enslaved population? It's an amazing story. It happened somewhere in Piney Swamp. We'd love to know more. And if we go to the next slide, you can see, not quite, that was that one after, but this is, I'm sorry, yeah, you can go back to that one. This is the actual court case, just for reference. And I mean, the names on here are all big names around here, like Nan Page of Rosewell. He was involved in this to some degree. Sterling Sewell of Sewell's Ordinary right down the road. This is all these big areas. And they're all nervous about upheaval. So the next slide.
Sarah put a note in the chat about
Oh, yeah.
that. She said that, I read the reference in The Internal Enemy, that was the name of it, by Alan Taylor, then researched the references in the Library of Virginia records. And she said internal enemy meant the enslaved people.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much for getting that information there. And you see here, this is a very rudimentary map. We're trying to figure out where the enslavers live. So you see Augustus Olivier, I'm not sure how to pronounce that, it's way up at Claybank. You have John Catlett of Timberneck, one of his people were involved in this. You have people all the way down again. So there's so much information and storytelling we're trying to do here that happened in Piney Swamp of all places. Who knows what else is in the history book? Is in the records that survive, I should say. Let's go to the next one. Yeah, so this is a blessing of the ground at the site of the remembrance structure. This is back in March. This is another thing that the family circle, Fairfield, Apostle Marquita, and a lot of the other local pastors have been involved in. And it's been amazing to see this structure built. It's not built on the site of where we found archaeological evidence of a slave quarter, but it's representative. That's what it's telling us. That's what it is. And we chose this location very carefully, and there's a lot of plans for it. I don't think it's built, but it's a ghost structure. It's the outline. There aren't walls. I believe there may be a roof put on at some point. There will be a floor put in. We may have those boards, but that is another thing that has been an amazing cooperation, and to see so many people out there. The dedication just happened a few weeks ago at Rosewell, and everyone's encouraged to go take a look at it. Next, please. Yeah, so kind of going off of all these themes about what the mapping has taught us, I'll show you a few stories. So this is the story of the Allen Farm. I don't want to go into too much detail, but this is a property, a lady who lived there, came to the last Antioch homecoming, and unfortunately she has passed away since then. But there's a story that this property was black owned for generations before the year 1900, and it's a big farm. It's like 30 plus acres. And there's a story that there may have been sort of, I think it was a Bellato family or something like that lived back in that area, but they kept such a massive farm. And it's an amazing story that we're going to learn more about. And what you'll notice on it, on the plat right there, which we found, you see how there's a swamp here and a swamp here. This is sort of a tongue of land. It's sort of out of the way. And it's sort of tucked away from, there's a little bit of security and privacy there. And that's one thing we're wondering if that's one of the reasons why the family was able to keep the land and still has it to this day. So using that plat there, we found the names that were on that plat, such as William Woodland, who's highlighted down below. And we look at these names in the land tax books. If you go to the next slide, this is where we did GIS work. So I drew the polygon for it, showing where the property was, and I took the land tax, which basically says who pays taxes on it. Doesn't mean they own it, doesn't mean they live there, it just means they pay taxes on it. That's an easy first step for the lot of stuff we do. And we took as many years as we could. We got from 1848 to 1870 and looked at who owned that property each year. We're trying to figure out when this black family got hold of the land. We haven't got an answer quite yet. We know it was by the 1890s or so. But this is another thing where we can help people learn where their family lived. You know, where exactly was it? You know, what's the name? Who do they live next to? GIS technology is really amazing. Let's go to the next one. And so here's where we talk about the Allens. We haven't connected it from when it was owned by William Woodland, who was a white person, to Henry Allen, who was a black person, and his descendants still own it. But we have, when we have the names from the land tax books, we can look at the census, we can look at the families. There's so much genealogy we can do, and a lot of people in the area have done their genealogy, and we can just help guide them with some additional stuff we can talk about more. What do you do when you have a genealogy? You have names and dates, but what is the where? Where is it? Where do they actually live? And where do they come from? So many questions. Let's look at the next one. So this is another little story that's really amazing. First Baptist Church, it's at Ordinary, it's right down the road. It's not to be confused with First United Baptist Church. This is just First Baptist Church. This church is on Highway 17, but their cemetery is way off on another road, several miles away. So another question is, a lot of these people seem to be related to the Piney Swamp community of earlier. But why is their cemetery so far from the church? Was the church originally at the cemetery and then they moved it to 17, or maybe the cemetery came later? We don't really know. We do know that Glascow Cemetery, as it's called, is also known by other names. It's known as Graveyard Bottom. Sometimes it seems to be called the Hill Cemetery. You'll see the cemetery is in red down there. If we go to the next slide, this is what really blew my mind. We found a plat for the Gloucester Place plantation in about 1870, I think. But what's amazing is that when you zoom in to where the cemetery is today, it says quarter-acre graveyard. The graveyard was already there in 1870, but the church is still using it. So how can we, connect people with their ancestors in the actual places? It's just by trying to map things out. We were talking to someone the other day, and she was able to tell us that her ancestor was David Burrell. Well, sure enough, David Burrell, right there above the cemetery. He owned that land. So maybe this is the Burrell Cemetery. The Burrells owned Fairfield at one point, and the enslaved people, a lot of them took the name Burrell. We think, maybe not. So there's so much connections to be made, and there's so much stuff that is uncovered every day by doing this mapping. We go to the next. Oh yeah.
Hey, Nathaniel. Nathaniel, I just wanted to throw in there that the Allen oral history, the Allen family oral history says that a white man named Henry Allen gave it to his son, a black man named Henry Allen, and that's how they came into ownership of the property. Although we haven't proved that with records yet, it's their oral history.
Yeah, thank you so much for throwing that in there. I got a little bit turned around. There's so many stories, but trying to figure out, how did a white person give a black person land? We want to map it out and show people the where, and that's an amazing story. And oral histories are powerful, and they're true. And when the documentary records show something that appears different, that's not necessarily always the case. Oral histories mean a lot. Can we go to the next one? We have these old plats. It's overwhelming sometimes. All the lines and numbers on there, it's just overwhelming the amount of work went into that. And it's not just someone out there going out there with a surveying instrument. You have chain bearers. People have to actually carry the rope or the chain to show, which is of a set length, and that's how they measured how far things were. These were colossal amounts of effort. So I wanted to talk just a few minutes about some cemetery preservation stuff we're doing. So every year we talk about the African American Cemetery Fund. The state of Virginia offers some amount of funding for burials, and we try to get several cemeteries through every year. It's always tricky to battle the paperwork and all things like that. But if anyone who's ever interested, or you're talking to other people out here, we try to spread the word. So Gloucester Cemetery I was talking about, we worked with them a little bit this year. And a massive cemetery like that can net a pretty decent chunk of money every year to be used for maintenance and things like that. So one thing about this, let's see. Okay, it's a different screenshot than I thought. But it updates every year, you have to resubmit stuff every year. And one of those things that involves is looking at death certificates, the cemetery itself, getting a list of people buried in cemeteries. So we go to the next one. Yeah, so this is another interesting little story. This right here, Henry Wright, is buried in Antioch Cemetery. He's right here. And so his name appeared on the cemetery application that we helped submit with you all. If you go to the next slide, you see this one, Laura and Tad at First Baptist Church. First Baptist Church and Gloucester Fields are the same one, even though the church and the cemetery are not the same place. If you go to the next slide, this is where things get interesting. Abraham Lewis, buried at Gloucester Field. Well, his gravestone is here at Antioch. So there is such a deep connection between these churches and cemeteries that we can't even always parse out what's what. Why Abraham Lewis, why his gravestone is here at Antioch, but the death certificate says somewhere else. But then some death certificates say Gloucester Field, but it means First. There's a lot to learn. And talking with people that are descendants of these families has been really rewarding, especially at Family Circle, because they've lived here and they know the places, people that live in Ordinary or places like that. Let's see what the next slide is. All right, yeah, so what are we doing next? Where are we going from here? Trails, that's one thing we sort of talked about a little bit last time, and it's always great to hear what people at Antioch are thinking too. So if you look on the right, you see that is the current trail we have. It is an awkward distance, it's like 0.64 miles. I don't know how that happened. It is mainly a birding trail. I believe the Master Gardeners did it. It offers gorgeous views of the Fairfield, Carter's Creek at Fairfield. So you can see the creek, you can see all kinds of animals and plants. The mayaples are amazing. But what do we do with it? I mean, do we want to do some sort of storytelling on it? And then what do we do with the rest of the acreage? So the yellow box there, that is all the property that Fairfield owns. The little red dot is Antioch Church. So everything right across the road from Antioch, this view is all Fairfield, we own it. But do we want to put some sort of work on a trail back there, or have sort of a heritage trail and tell some of these stories, have signs out there, take people out to the ditch, take people out to these areas. We're at a really good point where we're starting to find stuff about Piney Swamp and we're meeting incredible people, but we have to keep talking about it and see what we're going to do. Let's see what's next. All right, back to Antioch. There's one more slide, I think. Yes, I like to throw this one in there. It's just sort of a timeline of Antioch Baptist Church. It was organized 1922 according to the cornerstone, I think. And then it's gone from, I believe, the Humphreys and the Williams, those are black families, the Fields. Ended up Antioch Baptist Church for many years, now the Truth in the Spirit. But where does it fit in with everything else? And what do we do about, the Antioch Week and Antioch Homecoming are such amazing events for y'all to do, and it's been so great to come out for that, to see all the people that come out and are here. But it's not just about, storytelling and cemetery preservation. It's about, I can't articulate what's next, so we'll have to see. And I throw this in there too on the right just because it's interesting. That is a screenshot from what is on Find a Grave. 82 memorials at Antioch Baptist Church, 72% photographed. There's a lot that a monument never went up. There's a lot of death certificates we've been through, and we haven't actually put them on Find a Grave. Not every cemetery uses Find a Grave. I personally think it's invaluable for big cemeteries like the Rosemont Memorial Gardens or whatever. There's several thousand people buried there. Find a Grave has coordinates on there. So if you're looking for your aunt and you've never been to her burial, you know right where to go. So it's an amazing tool we really encourage people to look at, especially for the bigger cemeteries. At Antioch, it's pretty easy to find what you're looking for there. But maybe one day we put the coordinates there or something. Let's see. Yeah. All right, let's see what's next, if there is anything else. Oh yeah, just a reminder, Antioch Homecoming is coming up. Thank you all very much, and I will be here to talk and answer questions and eat as long as we can.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. thanks again,